All right, guys. So today is not a great day to be a Tar Heel. Well, it's always a great day to be a Tar Heel, but today is not as great of a day to be a Tar Heel because my alma mater got caught up in a huge drug ring, right? That involved fraternities on campus and a network that facilitated the distribution of hardcore narcotics across the state. Now, obviously, I don't like talking about this and covering this because it makes my school look bad. Because when you trap at this level on college campuses, it is national news. But before we get in that, my name is Greg Foreman. You're watching a Black Conservative Perspective. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black Conservative Perspective, aka a leftist worst nightmare. You can also follow me on Twitter at gforemanbcp. Let's get it. All right, guys. So unfortunately, my school is in the New York Times, so I have to cover it. Drug dealing network alleged that Duke, UNC Chapel Hill, and Appalachian State. Prosecutors said current and former students were part of an operation that funneled thousands of pounds of marijuana, hundreds of kilos of cocaine, and other drugs to fraternities and college campuses. 21 people, including current and former students at Duke University, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, and Appalachian State University, have been charged with dealing thousands of pounds of marijuana, hundreds of kilograms of cocaine, and other drugs on campus and in fraternity houses, federal prosecutors said on Thursday. Matthew G.T. Martin, the United States Attorney for the Middle District of North Carolina, said those charges were a part of a sophisticated network that fueled a, quote, drug culture at fraternities and universities in North Carolina. They funneled large amounts of cocaine and marijuana, as well as LSD, steroids, Xanax, and other drugs into the universities and the surrounding towns over several years, he said, sometimes operating right out of their fraternity houses. The defendants used encrypted apps and electronic payment methods like Venmo and PayPal and laundered their proceeds, which exceeded 1.5 million, he said. Wow, this is crazy. Not because I'm surprised at all, right? Not from experience, right? But from observation of not being too long removed from graduating from UNC Chapel Hill. Again, I'm not surprised at all. You know, some of these guys at these parties that I personally have been to, you know, they be so zanned out that they don't even care if I knew a brother or not, right? They don't ask me, did you know a brother? How are you in here? You know, how did you get in the house? Some of these guys, again, so tweaked, they don't even care, right? And I've seen some crazy things go down in these houses that really are some unbelievable stories. So I'm not surprised at all, right? And you know what I'm also not surprised about is the fact that these fraternity houses basically are trap houses, or some of them, again, just from, you know, observation, being on campus, and just being around the environment. Again, not surprised at all. Now, what I am surprised about is that this thing got big enough to exceed 1.5 million in sales. Apparently, this is a full-blown Pablo Escobar, El Chapo, Tony Montana style drug ring that's being ran at UNC Chapel Hill, unfortunately, hopefully without the violence. But this was kind of big. And, quote, this situation is not where you have single users, where you have a 19-year-old sipping a beer, where you have someone taking a puff of a joint on the back porch of a fraternity house, Mr. Martin said at a news conference. These are 21 hardened drug dealers. So it looks like these guys was basically trapping for a living. And what's also kind of funny is that, you know, if you take any business classes at UNC Chapel Hill, there's you know, this class of entrepreneurship class that they make you take. You have to go out and kind of you know, start like a business or whatever, right? So I'm wondering if some of these guys was doing this to complete their entrepreneurship project requirement at the business school. At least 11 of those charges are believed to be current and former students at Appalachian State, Duke, or UNC, Mr. Martin's office said. The other 10 defendants are either not students or investigators are not sure when and where they attended college. Prosecutors said the investigation had uncovered drug sales at UNC Chapel Hill chapters of Phi Gamma Delta, Kappa Sigma, and Beta Theta Pi between 2017 and the spring of 2020. So it looks like the investigation started the last year I was in school. So maybe it was going on while I was there. Maybe it was not. Wouldn't be surprised if it was. Prosecutors also charged a member of Delta Chi at Appalachian State in Boone, North Carolina, with dealing LSD. No fraternities at Duke have been implicated in court documents, Mr. Martin's office said. Mr. Martin said sales were taking place inside fraternity houses with the dealers set up inside their rooms, poisoning fellow members of their fraternity. That's a hardcore statement right there. In one case, a defendant who had been cooperating with investigators described regularly supplying drugs to Phi Gamma Delta member at UNC Chapel Hill who sold only to other fraternity members, prosecutors said. The cooperating defendant said he felt safe selling to the fraternity members, charged Poindexter, because most of the sales took place in the fraternity house behind closed doors. Drugs were sold for frat parties, with bigger parties requiring more drugs, prosecutors said. Again, some of these parties that I've been to, these guys are off the chain, man. Mr. Poindexter, 23, told investigators that he had bought cocaine, marijuana, and MDMA, known as Molly, from the cooperating defendant. And he said that all 22 members of his fraternity pledge class, quote, went in to buy an ounce of cocaine for spring break in his sophomore year. Mr. Martin's office said Mr. Poindexter was charged with conspiracy to distribute cocaine, use of a communication facility to facilitate a drug felony, and distribution of controlled substance within 1,000 feet of a public or private college or university. A graduate of UNC, he has not yet entered a plea, but has, quote, great remorse for his actions, according to his lawyer, David B. Friedman. Quote, Mr. Poindexter comes from a great family. Mr. Friedman said, I'm sure he does. The requirements to get in some of these fraternities, you got to come from a great family. That's kind of how it goes. Quote, he has been very cooperative with the process. Unfortunately, when kids go off to college, they live in a bubble and don't realize that there are real life consequences to their actions. Sure, they didn't know that trapping out of their frat house was illegal. They just didn't think they'd get caught. That's what the real issue is. Kevin M. Gaskiewicz, the chancellor at UNC Chapel Hill, said that the university was, quote, extremely disappointed to learn of these alleged actions on our campus. The quote, the university is committed to working with law enforcement to fully understand the involvement of any university officials or organizations so that disciplinary action can be taken, he said in a statement. Quote, although none of the individuals named today are currently enrolled students, we will remain vigilant and continue to work with our law enforcement partners to identify and address any illegal drug use on our campus. Phi Gamma Delta said in a statement that it was, quote, disheartening to learn of the allegations involving our chapters and members at the University of North Carolina. Quote, the allegations suggest conduct that violates our laws, policies, and values, the fraternity said, adding that it will cooperate with law enforcement agents and the university. Quote, such conduct will not be tolerated. Mr. Martin's office said the investigation began several years ago when Orange County Sheriff's Office received information about illegal drug sales at UNC Chapel Hill. Ultimately, investigators discovered that people involved had been shipping cocaine through the mail from California and transporting marijuana by car. So this was a cross-country operation, apparently, right? So, for example, they weren't just going to places across the state to get it, or local suppliers. They were getting it from California, where it is currently legal. A primary supplier, Francisco Javier Ochoa Jr., 27, of Turlock, California, was the first person charged in the investigation, prosecutors said. He was indicted in November 2019 on charges that he supplied about 200 pounds of marijuana and 2 kilograms of cocaine every week to a cooperating defendant in Orange County, North Carolina. Mr. Ochoa pleaded guilty to conspiracy to distribute cocaine and marijuana on November 24th and was sentenced to just over 6 years in prison and 5 years of supervised relief. He was also ordered to pay $250,000 forfeiture. Mr. Ochoa's lawyer, David B. Smith, declined to comment. In addition to Mr. Ochoa, 7 other defendants have pleaded guilty to at least one charge and are scheduled to be sentenced next year. All right, guys, so I think that's enough information for us to get the kind of full gist of kind of what happened with this story. Now, stories like this kind of bring up interesting questions, right? In terms of the acceptability of college students using drugs on campus and in being involved in hardcore drugs. Now, some people will say that, hey, the full power of the law should be thrown at these students, right? They should be charged to the full extent of the law. They brought harm to people on campus. They hurt students. And ultimately, at the end of the day, what they was doing was illegal. Now, some people will say that, hey, these were college students, kind of like what was said in this article. They made a mistake, and maybe the law should be taken lightly on them because they're young and they made a mistake. Second question, that's more of an economics question, is how some states legalizing marijuana and some states not legalizing marijuana, with the federal government kind of just letting the states do their own thing, how did that affect the economics of drug use across the country as a whole? For example, it is thought that illicit drug use has an inelastic demand curve, which means that as price goes up, demand does not necessarily drop at a proportionate level, which means that in places where drugs are illegal, cost for suppliers is going to go up because of law enforcement and the opportunity costs associated with trying to transport drugs without getting caught and things of that nature. The cost for suppliers of these drugs may go up. However, because the demand is not necessarily falling at the same rate, it does not necessarily lead to less drug use, but just more total spending in the market as a whole. Now, with it being legal in some states, which could possibly be lowering the price of drugs as well, will that actually increase the demand and lead to more drug use in states where it is illegal, because it is a lot easier to get it within the country rather than having to go out of the country, such to South America, in order to get drugs? Now, we know typically with inelastic goods that slight decreases in price may not necessarily increase demand too much, but I'm just curious in terms of how some states having it legal and some states not having it legal, how that affects the overall market. And that's something I'll probably do more research into. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I do think that illegal drug use on college campus is a problem that needs to be addressed, right? Primarily because, one, these students don't necessarily know what they're getting in these drugs, because these drugs are being obtained in a black market, right? They could be cut with, any type of substance or chemical that could potentially be harmful to students and maybe cause long-term damage to students and ruin students' lives, kind of like the way these students' lives are probably about to be ruined. Again, I think this is something that we don't really talk about a lot in terms of what goes on college campuses across America. The whole point of me doing this story is that I want to know what you guys think. Do you guys think that these former students and people that's involved in this should be charged to the full extent of the law, or do you think that they should be given a second chance? But anyways, let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.